Welcome back to the final session on the Jewish approach to astrology. We mentioned last time that the astrological influences have a role on determining a person's personality. They show what tendency a person will be inclined towards. And we asked the question, is this set in stone? What about predicting the future? That's what we're going to discuss tonight. So, the Gemara in Shabbos, among many other places, said that the stars influence the behavior and destiny of a person. However, we're told in other places, in the Talmud in particular, the Gemara in Pesachim, that a Jew is not allowed to use the stars or any other means to predict the future. And this is based on a verse, Tamim tihiya im Hashem Elokecha. You shall be pure or sincere with Hashem your God. This is how it's codified in the Code of Jewish Law. So even though the sages agree that it works, that there is a certain truth, that the stars have influence, that you can analyze character traits or situations if you have the proper tradition, you're still not allowed to predict the future. So if there is a veracity to the stars, why is it that we're not allowed to predict the future? So today, first of all, if a person goes to an astrologer, psychic network, or wherever the people go, it's completely false. And I hope that people will avoid doing this at all, because they've lost the tradition, certainly. Even those who claim that they have, they're using the original and whatever, it's a total sham. Most 99% of the time today, anyone who claims that they have any inkling about astrology doesn't know what they're talking about. Secondly, even if a person did know what they're talking about, as we learned in the first session, that when a person gives an astrological prediction about what's going to be in the future, it's very vague anyway. It has it's just a certain hints about what lies in the future, but it's very vague and shouldn't be relied on as well. But a third thing is that, again, we have to realize that all of these things are just indicators, are just signs, are just the default mode. And anything that we can do, anything that we need to change can be changed. We're human beings, we're Jews, we have free will. We're connected with the source. And the source is beyond all the stars, all the other realms, all the spiritual worlds. We're connected with God, we're connected with the head. Rabbi Joseph Albo, author of Sefer HaIkrim, says over there that the stars determine a destiny to some point, but can be changed by free will or merit. So again, we're not saying that there's no truth. We're just advising that we don't consult the astrologers or consult the horoscopes in the first place. Any sage that we're going to be speaking about, some sages tonight that they were concerned about astrology, they didn't consult the astrologer. They happened to find out what their astrological reading was. So the Rambam says in his Mishnah Torah that one who believes the predictions of the astrologers is being childish and foolish. However, he also says in his introduction to the Pirush HaMishnayos that the predictions contain truth, just not exact. So what is it? Is it being childish and foolish, or do they contain truth? Perhaps one way to reconcile this idea is say one who acts on the predictions and doesn't rely on Hashem is being childish and foolish. Not that they don't contain a certain glimmer of truth, but that we shouldn't lower ourselves as Jews who are connected with God to fiddling with these things and caring what's my sign for today, what's my astrological influence today. I'm a Jew. Realize that we're connected with the source. We have Torah and mitzvahs. We have something that trumps everything. And so what do I have to look at this with the stars for? Jews transcend their forecast. The Gemara explains that Abraham had a dialogue with God and said to him, When God promised him that he was going to have a child, Abraham looked up and said, God, I've seen in my astrology, I've seen in the stars that I'm not destined to have a child. What does God say? What does God respond back to him? So you see how Jupiter's in the east over there? I'll just move it to the west. Meaning, I'm God. I run the show. The stars don't make or break reality. The stars don't make or break the fate. They're indicators. I run the show. God runs the show. And for a Jew, our only reliance should be on God. There's a principle in the Talmud, Ein Mosel liYisrael, that the Jewish people are not subjugated to the influence of the stars. This may be, when a person is born in a certain hour, a certain day, a certain month, he may have a certain tendency towards something, but being that he's a free-willed creature, he can transcend this tendency that he has, this inclination that he has towards the sign that he was born under. So, like we mentioned the last time, one born under, for example, the Mazel Ma'adim, Mars, it says that a person will be inclined towards blood. Now, a person through his free will can choose to be an axe murderer. Don't go to court and say, Judge, don't convict me, I was born under Mazel Ma'adim. Because the same inclination towards blood can make a person be a surgeon, can make a person be a ritual slaughter, a shochet. So we are not governed by the influence of the stars. This is just a default inclination that a person may have. Ein Mazel Yisrael. Whatever the mazel is dictated for a person's personality, whatever the mazel dictates for a person's future, the Jewish people are not subjugated to this. They can rise above it. We are connected with God. We're connected with the source. In Kabbalistic terminology, it uses a play on words, Ein Mazel Yisrael, which literally means there is no astrological influence for the Jews, and says Ein Mazel Yisrael. Ein, meaning Ein Sof, Hashem, God, is the influence of the Jewish people. God is the one guiding us. God is the one in control, not the stars, not for the Jewish people. We can override it through Torah and mitzvahs. There's some great stories. We'll talk about two as examples of sages overcoming astrological influences through Torah and mitzvahs. There's a story in the Talmud, in the Gemara and Shabbos, about an astrologer coming over to Rabbi Akiva and telling him, your daughter is going to die on the night of her wedding. So it says that Rabbi Akiva was concerned, but he didn't act upon it. He didn't, wedding's canceled, that's it. He was concerned, he thought about it, but the wedding went on as it was supposed to be. That night, that evening, his daughter came home from the wedding festivities, all the dancing, all the singing. You can imagine, it's Rabbi Akiva's daughter over here. The place is going to be packed with people, the best food, the best dancing, great time. So the bride, his daughter, comes back home that night, and those days they didn't have electric lights, and it was very dark at night. So she comes in, she takes off her gown, she takes off her veil, and she sticks it with a pin into the wall and goes to sleep. What happens the next morning? She wakes up. Oh, surprise. She looks over at the pin that she had stuck in the wall, and there was a snake. It went right through a snake. There was a snake lying there. Obviously, this was going to be a snake that was going to bite her at night, kill her. But unknowingly, she stuck a pin right through it at night, not seeing even. So Rabbi Akiva saw this and asked her, excuse me, well, my daughter, what did you do today that maybe merited this wonderful turn of events? So she said, by the wedding festivities and all the preparation and the planning and all the tumult of everything going on, the dancing, the singing, the food, there was a poor man who came to the wedding hall, looked hungry, Everyone was so involved in what they were doing, the festivities, that no one even noticed him. I noticed him, and not only did I find him some food, I gave him my own plate. So Rabbi Akiva taught that through this act of tzedakah, through this charitable act, she changed her entire fate. Again, he didn't act on it initially. He didn't cancel the wedding and say, oh, let's govern ourselves by what the astrologers say. He realized that it had some truth to it. However, tzedakah, mitzvahs, Torah and mitzvahs, can change a person's fate for the better. When we do a mitzvah down here, we change reality. We change the very fiber of existence. We are not limited by our astrological signs. We are not limited by anything. Ein Mosel Yisrael, Hashem, God, is the influence of the Jewish people. Another story is that the mother of Rabbi Nachman bar Yitzchak is told by an astrologer that her son, when born, would be a thief. So she took heed to these words, and from the moment he was born, made sure his head was always covered. In fact, that's one of the early sources for the idea of a yarmulke. The idea of a yarmulke, wearing a head covering, is so a person realizes there's always something above them. In fact, the word yarmulke, many say, is consisting of two words: Yare Malka, fear of the king. It's always on the person's mind. So it says that, being that happened, being that Rabbi Nachman bar Yitzchak's mother always kept his head covers, it swayed his inclination to steal. One time his yarmulke fell off and he did have the inclination to steal. The inclination was still there, but it was tamed through this act that his mother took. So again, she was concerned with what the astrologer said, but we can get around it, we can go past it, we can transcend it. When Jewish people have a problem, what do? I'm talking about a regular, typical problem. For example, you get the cell phone bill this month. It's really high. Astronomically high. Like, this doesn't even make sense. I didn't make these calls. So what do? You call the cell phone company, and you start talking to them. Look, there's no way I made these calls, and it doesn't work, and I didn't know I was roaming, I didn't know this. And what does the person on the phone usually tell you? Sorry, sir, there's nothing I can do. What does any good Jew do? Let me speak to your supervisor. Meaning, this person, this representative that you're speaking to on the phone, he can't do anything because the system that's been set up, he doesn't have the ability. He's just a member of the system. He's a working pawn in the system. He can't do anything for you. So you want to speak to someone who can do something for you. Let me speak to your supervisor. And if the supervisor can't help, let me speak to that person's supervisor. And a good Jew will go all the way to the CEO of a company if they have to, in order that that cell phone bill get reduced. It works a very similar way in the world. God set up a system, the way things work. The way that His bounty flows into this world is through worlds. Those worlds embody energy. The messages, the energy is communicated through the means of angels, if you will. Those are represented, they're indicated by the stars, and whatever's out indicates to us what's going on in the spiritual world. But that system that was set up, we can go to the supervisor. We can go all the way to the CEO at the top. We don't have to waste our time. A good Jew doesn't waste their time with the little pawns. We go right to the supervisor. We go right to the CEO. Ein Mosel Yisrael. God is the Mosel of the Jewish people. God is the one who determines and is influencing the Jewish people's lives. Torah and mitzvahs is what we need to change our life, not our astrological charts. Always got to go to the supervisor. So for a Jew to consult astrology, to look at the horoscopes, it's below them. We don't need this. I saw in one place pointed out that there's the sun and the moon, that's 2. Then you have the planets, there's 5 planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And then you have the 12 signs of the 12 constellations. So the 5th letter, the 5 planets corresponding to the 5th letter. What's the 5th letter of the Hebrew alphabet? Is Hey. Then you have the sun and the moon, 2. What's the 2nd letter of the Hebrew alphabet? Base. And what's the 12th letter corresponding to the 12 constellations? What's the 12th letter? Is Lamed. It spells out the word Hevel. Hevel means emptiness, nothingness. For a Jew to be focused on and zeroed in and trying to find out their future, we rely on God. Everything else is just emptiness. We can change it. Why waste your time? There are things in Jewish tradition that are perhaps a little bit more apropos if a person wants to get some insight into their personality or their destiny. It says that at a time that a person is born, every Jew is given a Jewish name. That Jewish name contains with it tremendous meaning. And for a person to look into what their Jewish name means, its history, its spiritual meaning and indications, that says a tremendous amount of not only a person's personality, but what their destiny, what lies in store for them. This is reflected in the idea that when a person is very ill, terminally ill, oftentimes there's a Jewish tradition to change their name. Meaning the name is so connected with their fate, with their destiny, with what they embody, what they represent, what their mission is, that through changing the name slightly, we hope to change also the fate. So look into your Jewish name, not necessarily your astrological sign. If you wanted to go by what's happening in the air, we're also given a very accurate system. It's called the Parsha of the Week. Many people, when they say, oh, Parsha of the Week, Hebrew school, wow. No, it doesn't work like that. The Parsha of the Week is the energy of the week. Every week, the entire Jewish people worldwide are reading the same portion. That portion is divided up into 7 aliyahs, 7 sections. Each day has a certain section that we're reading. So every day of the year has a certain energy from the Torah as to what's taking place. Learn the Parsha of that day if you want to get a little insight into what's taking place in the spiritual worlds.